What's up, guys? Welcome back to Newswave. So in just a couple of weeks, Microsoft's next big game, Redfall, will come out, but they have just been having the hardest time avoiding any kind of controversy with this one, and the latest announcement can only be described as disastrous, as it sent the entire internet into a frenzy and even get to the point to call for its delay. We'll go over that here today. Also, we are going to be talking about PlayStation Plus with extra and premium tier, new games coming in, but an interesting one actually leaving the service, and we'll also be talking about Mega Man Battle Network Legacy Collection as reviews did go live. Guys, if you enjoy these videos, make sure you hit that like button, helps that a ton, and if new here to the Spawnwave channel, make sure you subscribe down below. And we're going to start today with The Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom, as we do have a new trailer to look forward to, and it's a big enough deal that Nintendo decided to not only announce it, but also live stream this trailer. We can see this posted up over on Twitter from Nintendo of America saying, join us on April 13th, 7 a.m. Pacific time to watch the final pre-launch trailer for The Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom, live streamed on our YouTube channel. The trailer will be roughly 3 minutes long. I did a video on the second channel, Spawnwave Plus, kind of giving my thoughts as to what I'd like to see in this trailer, and it kind of reminds me a bit of that big final trailer with the release date for Breath of the Wild they played at the end of that January Switch presentation, where it was a big buildup of all these different moments from the story, and it was a really well done trailer, but it gave us a general idea as to what was going on in Breath of the Wild, and that's what I expect with Tears of the Kingdom in this trailer. I'd also like to see maybe something to do with dungeons or shrines, or what's the overall structure for this one, but make sure you check that out. It will be live in a couple of hours, 10 a.m. Eastern Time. Also, we did have a big game announcement for Trine fans out there. This was posted up by Gamatsu. They say publisher THQ Nordic and developer Frozen Byte have announced Trine 5, A Clockwork Conspiracy for PlayStation 5, Xbox Series, PlayStation 4, Xbox One, Switch, and PC. This through Steam. It will launch this summer. I've never really been into the Trine games, but I do know there's a pretty dedicated fan base here. It's a kind of a 2.5D style game, action, adventure, RPG with different puzzle elements to it. They do mention this one having 1 to 4 players, so single player, local, and online cooperative play, which is pretty cool there. But there you have it, a new Trine game to look forward to sometime this summer, though. That's all they really said, so we'll have to look out for an exact release date. Oh, and we've been talking about this AEW Fight Forever game as it sort of popped up in the news, specifically running up to things like Gamescom last year. And now it seems like there was talk about the game just being done and maybe could be announced for its release at any point. Well, we do have a response from the community manager. We can see this posted up by Ziddy, who says, if you want an unfinished game, sure, we could release it now. Again, this is the community manager for THQ Nordic. The game is doing really well and is getting there, but not 100% yet. So yeah, just another rumor on Twitter, I fear. And again, people were wondering, okay, well, if Tony Khan at AEW says that the game is complete, does that mean that means it's good to go, right? It can come out. Well, technically, it could be complete, content complete, but there's still work to do when it comes to ironing out any bugs, polishing, or even going through certification with different platform holders. So both things could technically be true. The game is complete, but is not necessarily ready for release. So I was sort of hoping this game would have been out by now for 2023, and now it's kind of looking like maybe a late summer to fall release for it. So again, I'll keep an eye on this one because I am curious how this is going to turn out, since there have been some comparisons drawn to older gameplay styles like No Mercy, and having an alternative to WWE 2K would be great. And guys, with some of the quick news out of the way, let's get into the bigger stuff. Let's start right away with Redfall. This, of course, coming out in a couple of weeks. It'll release May 2nd, heading right into Game Pass on PC and on Xbox. You can also play it through the cloud if you'd like to on your phone, or hey, through your TV if it has that application that's already enabled. But something happened yesterday that really set the internet off. Now, Redfall has had its issues when it comes to just PR, like the always online. That was a whole thing to where apparently they're looking into reversing that decision. We also had the situation with IGN First recently where the gameplay was so bad that it actually made the game itself look bad. We've had other gameplay that makes the game look good, but that was definitely a misstep there. And now we can see this tweet that was posted up that just got, crushed. It quote tweeted, comments. It was just beaten down into oblivion. Redfall is launching on Xbox consoles with quality mode only. Xbox Series X, 4K, 30 FPS, Xbox Series S, 1440p, 30 FPS. A 60 FPS performance mode will be added via game update at a later date. So at this point, I really believe that any of these games that are targeting, we'll just say higher end consoles, that's sort of that was the description that was given to kind of leave the Switch out of the mix. Remember when the PS5 and the Xbox with Microsoft, Activision Blizzard, and Sony there with the CMA and all. If you're targeting one of these higher end machines, the Series X and the PS5, I do believe a performance and quality mode is almost mandatory at this point, because when it's only capped at 30 FPS, we have seen quite a bit of pushback. I think of Gotham Knights, 30 FPS. There were a lot of issues with that one online, with how people were looking at it and just like, why can't this be 60 frames per second? We will turn down the visual quality, resolution, different effects of particles, whatever you got to do to get to that 60 frames per second. This isn't the Xbox 360 and the PS3 generation anymore, where we were playing in the 20 to low 30 FPS consistently. Now we've seen 60 FPS on some of these consoles, and for a lot of people, I think they're starting to see the light with frame rate, and that's actually a good thing. But Redfall in particular is an interesting case, because for a while, Arcane has been showing this game through marketing, PR, the whole deal, at 60 FPS. They even had an entire event where people came and played the game with Xbox controllers hooked up to a PC. In fact, it seems like the PC version will be your gateway to 60 FPS just at launch. This patch would be coming later, but how much later? Is it going to be the following week? The following month? Is it going to be later in the year? Again, that's a big unknown there. And it's now gotten to the point where people are calling for a delay, because it seems like this game is just being pushed out there before one of the other modes is just ready for performance mode. And this is a genre where frame rate in particular is going to matter, and it's just more sensitive to it. So certain genres doesn't necessarily matter as much for frame rate. Great example, turn-based RPG. Is the menu scrolling, does it really change that much going from 30 to 60? Not really. I mean, I guess the character animation stuff will look more fluid, but there's not as much reaction time needed there, right? Just scrolling through. But if you go to something like a fighting game or a racing game, you want the higher frame rate, and for most, 60 frames is the bare minimum. And I would say an online first-person shooter like Redfall would be right there with those two other genres. It also doesn't help that Microsoft was pushing the Xbox Series X as the strongest system ever made. It's a monster. We're talking about 120 frames over here. Come on. Definitely a big misstep for Redfall, which has really had a hard time on the build up to its release here. And is it worth delaying the game because you don't have performance mode, but it's quote-unquote content complete at 30 frames? Well, I feel like they probably have data that says more people will be playing at fidelity than performance with just other titles and things that they have, surveys. I'm sure they have a lot of focus group testing to tell them this, but it just seems strange to me to not have it prepared for launch immediately out of the gate. I do wonder, though, because I have talked to people who have said, no, I just leave it on fidelity. I don't mind the 30 FPS. I want the game to look next gen. I want it to look as good as possible. But for me, I always go to performance. I just prefer the 60 FPS. So I will ask you, what do you prefer? Would you rather leave it 30 frames per second but have the best looking game possible in front of you, or tone down some of the settings and aim for 60 FPS? One other thing, though, I have noticed, obviously people are bringing up Nintendo in the conversation with the Switch, and I will tell you this. When we get to Nintendo's next platform, if they're still operating at this like 25 to 30 frames per second setup like they kind of have now with the Switch, and we'll see how Zelda performs as an example, then I think we'll be revisiting the same kind of conversation with them. But right now, they're still operating on that 2015 chip. They're getting a lot out of it. So we'll see if Microsoft and Arcane are able to respond in any way, any kind of fix or something they can do here for Redfall. Otherwise, though, seems like they're set on that May 2nd release, and here's hoping that patch comes sooner rather than later after launch. Next up, let's talk about a couple of new video cards. Of course, with Nvidia, they saw pushback with their two variants of the RTX 4080, with one being unlaunched and then basically showing up again as a 4070 Ti. The 4090, also very expensive, so they're at least working their way back down to the higher end mid-range. We're still a far cry from having video cards that would come out at the price of $200 and would turn in a respectable performance, but I guess we're trending in the right direction. We can see this over on Nvidia, introducing the 4070 family. We, of course, know about the 4070 Ti there. The 4070 coming April 13th, so it is out today, and that is starting at $600. That's an optimistic price, though, because we know what happens on the market. These cards release, typically get bought up, and then we'll see people try to resell them on eBay and other places, starting probably $100 more. And other times it can get up even further than that, depending on, obviously, the fluctuations in the market. But there have been some reviews that have been coming out giving us an idea as to what you can expect out of the 4070. And it seems to be right in line with what Nvidia is describing it as, a 1440p gaming card. And for a lot of people, 1440p in PC gaming is still kind of the preferred resolution. In fact, it's what I prefer to play different PC games at, because you can still kind of leverage the higher frame rate, and you pair that with G-Sync, and games in general just run and look great. But like, for example, here you can see Tom's hardware. It did sort of a 15 game average with all the different video cards, and the RTX 4070 coming up right up against that 3080. And in fact, the minimum frame rate seemed to be a bit higher than the 3080. Now, when you go up to 4K, that's where the 4070 sort of falters, but having that 1440p kind of performance, along with DLSS 3 and 12 gigabytes of VRAM, which seems to be more and more necessary now, which is wild to think that you need 12 gigabytes on board your video card, which, again, go back 10 years ago and you would think that's crazy stuff, but here we are. It's at least a better option than what we've had in just the video card market. It's still not great, though. I would like to see cards come in closer to $400 and actually get a lot out of them. And I know Nvidia has made the case that DLSS 3 is worth it on its own, but the fact that they had to more or less introduce a new generation of cards to then push that and try to get people from DLSS 2 to 3, and it's a whole thing with Nvidia now, but at least, I guess, bare minimum, they are trending in the correct direction, and there's just more video cards to pick from now. So if you've been wondering about a 4070, there it is. It's out actually today, starting at $600. Next up, let's talk about PlayStation Plus games for the month of April, and these will be covering the extra and premium tier. These games will all be live starting April 18th, and we're going to cover some of the premium stuff separately because it does look like Sony is kind of pulling a fast one for this month. And then also, one game in particular is leaving the service that might surprise some people. Let's take a look here, though, starting at the top with that extra tier. And starting with Kena, Bridge of Spirits. Then we have Doom Eternal, Riders Republic, Wolfenstein 2, The New Colossus, Slay the Spire, Monster Boy and the Cursed Kingdom, The Evil Within, Wolfenstein The Old Blood, Bassmaster Fishing, Paradise Killer, and Sackboy: A Big Adventure. Again, the extra tier continues to look like the best value across the board from Sony. Just more games getting added in, and again, some pretty good ones. Kena, Bridge of Spirits, Doom Eternal, and I'm going to throw Monster Boy and the Cursed Kingdom in there. These are some high points that you definitely should check out. But if we move over to PlayStation Premium, these are the classics. So think of the PlayStation 1, PS2, PS3, I mean, that PSP. That's what I was looking for here, but, well, here's the selection. Doom, Doom 2, Doom 64, Doom 3, and Dishonored Definitive Edition. Okay, so to be fair, Doom 1, 2, 3, 64, yes, those are older Doom games that are on the PS4, but they're not games from like the PS1, 2, or 3, anything like that, PSP that's being emulated and utilizing some of the features and stuff that Sony's introduced alongside of some of those other PlayStation classic games that they have. So that's looking to me like them pulling a fast one, especially Dishonored, because that originated on the PS3. And I kind of wonder if they're like, yeah, but it was a PS3 game, and now this is the definitive edition that, yes, was already on the PS4, so it's a PS3 game that was ported to the PS4 that you're now playing backwards compatible on your PS5. Absolute classic. But after all of that, at the bottom of the page, in fine print, they do discuss some games that will be leaving the service, and You sort of expect that because they sign so many deals for length of time for these games to exist in the subscription tiers. These games will be leaving May 15th. But the one that caught my eye, which we'll go over all of them, Resident Evil, NBA 2K, Playgrounds 2. But the first one is Marvel's Spider-Man. And that surprised just about everyone because you look at that and you say, well, that's Sony's game. Not necessarily, and that's the interesting part about this. Technically, Sony has the rights for the movies, not the games, though. And technically, yes, they would have talked to Disney about the idea of this game being in the service, and I guess whatever contract they had signed for licensing, once that's up, Spider-Man comes out of the service. Again, it's a very strange thing necessarily to wrap your head around, but consider the fact that Spider-Man was in Marvel's Midnight Suns, that's on the Xbox, or how Spider-Man was in Marvel's Ultimate Alliance 3, which is actually still an exclusive to the Switch. So all of that technically makes sense on the licensing side. It's just, in terms of optics, it looks very strange, right? Especially with Spider-Man 2 coming up, but who knows, maybe this version's going out and they're going to re-up a licensing agreement so that the remastered version can get added in just ahead of Spider-Man 2. I think that would make a lot of sense, and hopefully that's the course of action here. But the biggest part about this that's disappointing to me, once again, is that premium side of PlayStation Plus. Kind of a cop-out here for the month with a bunch of these older Doom games. While that's great, I mean, they're not bad games, they're awesome titles, I would have liked to have seen a bit more creativity around which games to grab, especially from that, I don't know, PS2 generation that they really haven't done much with. So there you have it for PlayStation Plus Extra and Premium for the month of April. Here's hoping they can deliver a bit better with Premium for the month of May. And in our last bit of news, let's talk about Mega Man Battle Network Legacy Collection. It is out tomorrow, and I'm very excited to be picking this collection up and revisiting a series that I did play around with on the Game Boy Advance, but I only played 2 of them, that being the first and third one, although I guess they're all very similar and kind of blend together. But having them all in one place is an awesome thing to see, and we can take a look at some of the reviews here on the Switch version, which should have the most overall reviews that were turned in. Coming in at a 77, that's on 19 critic reviews, 15 positive, 4 mixed over on the critic split. And like at the top, Digital Chumps gave it a 98, which is very high. Actually, we've got a CG Magazine at 85. Then at the bottom, we have Hey Poor Player coming in at a 60. Now, I will admit, it's kind of hard to review a collection of games without necessarily looking back on the games and also seeing how they've aged. And I can admit, looking at Battle Network, if you go back to the first one on the Game Boy Advance, it's being blown up on a larger screen and all of that, and kind of the structure, technically, it hasn't aged the greatest, but I think for nostalgic purposes, it's still awesome. And it appears that Capcom has done a lot on the back end side when it comes to the gallery, kind of the museum they have set up, and even a trophy system. So if you're on the Switch, you don't necessarily have achievements outside of the game on like the system level. There's still stuff to earn. And yeah, I think this is a game that's just mostly going to be for fans of the original series, kind of as you'd expect. But hey, if you've been curious about Battle Network and you necessarily want to jump completely in, these are being sold as 2 different SKUs, so you can look on the digital store and pick one or the other. I mean, I would probably go with the first collection with, I think it's 1 through 4, and just see what you think from there, and then maybe just pick up the whole thing as the physical copy. But I'm excited, looking forward to revisiting Battle Network starting tomorrow. And before we go to the comment of the day, we're going to take a look at the poll that I posted up yesterday, where I ask, have you skipped a game because of a 30 FPS cap with no 60 FPS option? 76% say no, 24% say yes. So to me, if a game is fun, you're probably going to overlook any issues when it comes to visuals, frame rate, bugs, glitches, crashing, whatever. The number one driving force behind a game, and if it's being played, is if people enjoy it. Outside of that, though, yeah, it would, I think, always be better to have that higher frame rate option. I mentioned Nintendo, Zelda's coming up. I hope that when Nintendo's next platform releases, that Tears of the Kingdom has some sort of patch that allows it to do something like 60 frames per second, even if it's still kind of at that 1080p resolution. Give us that option of like a performance mode, an enhanced mode for the newer system, because while the game, I'm sure, is going to be good, like Breath of the Wild is awesome, I still look over at people emulating the game on their PCs at 4K 60, and it's just a better experience. So that's kind of where I am. It's like 30 If there's no other option, but the game is really good, you live with it. But you always hope for more, that being at least 60 frames. And we'll finish up with the comment of the day, as you're seeing here. This is from Huber. It says, shout out to John for putting out that quality content, although his voice is obviously compromised. Get well soon. First of all, Huber, appreciate the kind words there, but my voice right now sounds weird, but it doesn't like hurt or anything. It's mostly just from the temperature outside not being able to make up its mind. It's in this weird time period in the Northeast where once you leave March and go into April, one day it's 40 degrees Fahrenheit outside, the next day it's 80, and that's where we are now. We're just fluctuating back and forth, and there's pollen over the place one day, and the next day there's frost on the grass for some reason. So I'm thinking by the end of April, we'll be hopefully in that time, that like temperature range of it's basically 70 or 80 degrees outside, and that's kind of it, because as of now, it's just beating down everyone's allergies. But it's actually getting a bit better. I had to have some of the segments before, especially yesterday, be a bit shorter, but I think we're about to be like back to normal probably by this weekend. But again, appreciate the comment. And ladies and gentlemen, that's going to do it here for Newswave. If you enjoyed this video, guys, hit that like button. If not, hit the dislike. Leave comments down below about everything we talked about here today. Was Redfall just being 30 FPS at launch? Let me know if that's a deal breaker for you if you're originally checking this game out. And then also, what about PlayStation Plus? The premium tier, having a lot of Doom PS4 games, but then also Marvel's Spider-Man leaving the service. Did that surprise you? Thanks guys for watching, and I'll see you next time.